everybody, how are you all doing today? Sorry for the little delay there. I came onto my computer a little bit late and need to take care of a few things. So welcome to another study session where my friend Strangeborg Gem and I are learning how the Unreal Engine 4 works. We're still going through documentation. We've fortunately finished the working with audio, and we're already on the framework, game frameworks, and we're gonna continue that today. We started it yesterday. No, yesterday we didn't do it. Yeah, we started it last time. Anyways, before I hop onto his stage, we're gonna do a little bit of sellout. Down in the description below you'll find a link to the Power Shop where you can purchase energy mixes, sleep mixes, hydration mixes, shakers, and even stakers. If you use code BLACKHEART, you will get a 10% discount and help support the channel in the process. Now, I'm gonna hop on over to Jim's stage, which I believe he already started. If I can locate it, there it is.
Then we'll move on. If there's things that we're like, why is it doing that? Then we'll ask questions. And obviously, if those questions aren't really answered or we have difficulties, please feel free to step forward. Put some comments into our live stream chat if you're here with us live stream, or put it in the comment section of our YouTube videos. Okay. Either way, it would be of fantastic help for us. So, look forward to that. So, okay, I see that Blackheart has joined the stage. So let me go ahead and get him to speak. Although, let me make sure that my headset audio is available so that you can all hear him. There we go.
Hello there, Jim. How you doing?
Not bad, my friend. And yourself?
I'm doing okay.
That's good to hear. I saw that you were playing some Genshin Impact earlier.
I just logged in to grab the little trait for the Primos, since I came in my computer a little late.
Understandable. Okay, so, as I was updating everybody, we are going to be covering the game flow overview today. We finished off the gameplay framework quick reference yesterday, or not yesterday, the day before, but whatever. The last video if you're just watching this on YouTube. And looks like game flow overview is actually a really short
it is quite
article
short
overall. So okay, did you get any kind of comments or anything like that on your videos?
No, nothing.
Okay. Oh. Just curious. Again, wanted to ask, make sure if there's anything new, then we'll share it with each other, obviously. So, okay. So, we have the game flow overview, the process of starting the engine and launching a game or play an editor session. So, this document explains the process of starting the engine and launching a game. That right there seems like it would be, fairly easy to do. You just, double click the application to start up, and then there's a little playlet, and most often not to allow for you to kind of go into whatever you're using. But I'm assuming that they want to expand upon that a little bit more. So
yeah.
There are two main paths shown here. The editor path and the standalone path. Okay. The general order of events is to initialize the engine, create and initialize a game instance, then load a level, and finally start playing. However, there are differences between standalone and editor modes. both in terms of exact order of some of the functions that are called and in which functions are called. The flowchart below shows the two paths running in parallel until they converge at the start of the game. Okay, so they give you this image, which, you know, they say click to view full-size image, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Didn't really, well, my window is still kind of small, so it's kind of difficult to see all of it, but let me go with the editor side of things here. So you basically start up the engine. It initializes the Unreal Editor engine. It starts up the Unreal engine, or, you know, I guess instead of like, it's like start engine here, it doesn't like officially start until this point, I guess, based off of like it sets everything, you know, like you're activating the start, you know, you're basically like turning on the power switch, right?
Right.
It goes into like, you know, loading up all the necessary commands and functions and so on and so forth, you know, for the initialization here. And then it officially starts up, right? That's what that part is, or at least I would hope. um, uses presses play an editor button. Don't you mean user presses play an editor button?
Yeah,
I would hope that
there should be
the
a
case.
typo there.
Yeah. Okay, so you basically, you know, your engine is started. Basically, you know, much along the lines of how we start up the engine. You know, and then we play an editor, which creates a game instance. So it's like, okay, you know, that's understandable. The game instance initialize pi. Not quite sure what that is referring to. What pi is all about. Some additional initialization concerning the game instance. Create online session and register delegates. Okay. I would imagine, you know, if you were doing a online game in some form or another, then yeah, that would probably be something that, you know, you'd want to make sure that you get everything working properly. So understandable about that. Create Pi game instance. Again, I don't know exactly what they mean by Pi. Maybe play an environment or something like that. I don't know. But they start up another game instance about that for some reason. You start up the start Pi game instance, and then you get into the actual, you know, playing of the game. You know, you begin to play, you start the play, start the match, whatever that means, and spawn actors and begin the game. Okay. Now, this is, you know, the flow here of this, of the actual game here is very, you know, this is most likely different based off the game, right?
Right.
Because it's like, you know, start play. Why is there a start match? You know, this sounds to me like it's very much like a multiplayer online battle royale or something like that. That's what it sounds like to me in this particular case, right? As though you're playing like, you know, Apex or Fortnite or something along those lines. This seems like it's kind of lining up with that a bit.
Not sure, probably.
Uh, but it can, again, that's my that's how I envision it. Are you maybe thinking of something different at all, or
Not right now. Not that
okay?
I can think of.
Okay. I'm just kind of curious uh, if we have like maybe different opinions on that. Okay, so the standalone, which is basically meaning like, hey, you've already released the game out to the general public. Someone wants to play the game, so they, start up the engine, which is like, okay, in a sense, you're starting up the game there, guys, not necessarily starting up the engine. Um, which, they initialize the engine. They create the game instance. They initialize the standalone. Um, they initialize the game instance. Not, it was, initially they initialized the game engine, then they created the instance. They initialized the standalone game instance, and then they initialize all of it together in that single game instance. They create the online session and register delegates, and then they finally start up the entire engine with all of that. Notice how there's a lot of changes between when you started up the engine in the editor, and what happens from that engine start compared to the standalone, right?
Right.
So, and then after the engine starts in the standalone, that's when the game officially starts, right? Um, so all these steps prior, in the editor session kind of happens prior to the engine starting. So that's a little interesting. Um, Kind of interesting that they don't have um, in some ways they don't have like another like engine start down here in the editor, but at the same time, I mean they've already kind of started up the engine as well, so it's like okay. Um,
Hmm.
it's just um, it's one of those things where it's like, ordering is just interesting. you know, like, not quite sure why they have it in that kind of ordering, in a sense. Uh, like, why is the engine start here prior to, play an editor and not down there? So, I don't know. It's
Well, in the case of theater, the engine for the editor side, you can edit things before starting the play.
right.
That's why you have the
And
engine already running, it's just not running the game yet. You're modifying things before running the game. That's why it's
yeah,
further up.
yeah.
Well, on the other
And
side,
don't get
all
me
it
wrong,
needs to do is just initialize the engine and its dependencies and then start the game.
yeah. The It's just interesting to see that the locations of them are different based off of the editor and standalone. That's all. That's just a just an observation kind of thing. And on one hand, yes, I do get it. But on the other hand, it's just interesting to see, um, the slight difference between the two. Where when you have the standalone, everything gets initialized first, and then the engine starts. Whereas, in the editor, you have the engine start and then initializes everything. That's all. a slight observation, and so, alright. Um, Anything else that you want to maybe add to that or talk about? Or
Mm,
is everything pretty much straightforward for you for the most part?
for the most part, it's pretty understandable.
Okay. Now, there are, parts of it where I'm like, okay, um, what do they consider part of the game instance versus, what's part of the game engine? There's some questions there, like, um, what what's handled under both of those umbrellas, in in my mind right at this moment in time. But obviously they're not going to talk about that here. But it's still one of those things where it's like, I wonder what kind of goes into their game engine and game instance. But we may we'll find out more about that later, I would imagine.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it says up here, the general order of events is initialize the engine, create and initialize a game instance, then load a level. But it's like, okay, well, what is going into a game instance versus what is going into the engine of the game? You know, that's all. I'm just kind of curious as to what that's all about, and hopefully they will explain that. So,
Yeah, my in my guess, like the engine instances are just dependencies that are added by default, like things that the engine needs to run no matter what, and you have no control over it. Well, the game instances are the things you put in that you have control over. You tell it this is what you're gonna use.
hmm. I would say yes and no on that. Um, at least um, I, I I do see what you're saying on that, but at the same time, I wonder, mm, you know, like, um, it's not starting up the engine itself, especially in the standalone, right? Um, it's not starting it up, but I'm wondering, what all is it? Um, like, are you able to isolate parts of the engine that that you need versus what you don't need, and basically say, hey, engine, I just need you to focus on this part of what you're going to be doing, and that's it. Is that what the game engine instance is all about?
That would depend, I guess, on the
um,
plugins we put in. Maybe through that we'll telling it, we might be telling the engine, this is what you need to use.
that's that's why I'm thinking maybe that's like the focus of that, like within that standalone. It's like, hey, this engine is all about, taking, what plugins we've put in, what like, hey, we're using 2D, not 3D, so don't use anything 3D, for example. um you're setting up all um the rules of everything or something along those lines for the engine to go, okay, I see what you're trying to go for. I understand. Now, I will agree with you on the instance side where it's like, the instance is probably more along the lines of, um, like specific, like maybe controls, or basically something where it's like, hey, we want to be able to take in player input, um, maybe have some form of output to it or something like that. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud a little bit on that. I don't know if that's true or not, um, but yeah. Okay, moving on.
Yep.
Okay. In standalone mode, which is a mode used by games played outside of the editor, makes sense. The objects needed to play the game are created and initialized immediately following engine initialization on startup. Okay. Objects such as the game instance, again, you're not really stating what the game instance is there, guys, but we'll move on, are created and initialized before starting the game and starting the engine, distinct from creating and initializing the engine. And the starting map is loaded immediately after the engine's start function is called. Gameplay officially begins at that point with the level creating the appropriate game mode and game state, and then the other actors. Okay. And they're talking about it, but they're not really explaining it. You so, and I hope that they do that at some point. Explain, what all goes into the game instance. Like, hey, you know, it's like, great, you're talking about the game instance, game instance, game instance. Okay, what is it? And silence. It's like, give me, give me more. You know. Um,
Maybe at some other point they'll explain it.
maybe, or maybe they've already kind of talked about it in previous documentation, and we just kind of skipped over it. Which,
Or we
oops.
don't remember it.
That too. Um, editor. In editor mode, which is used by play an editor and simulate an editor, a different flow is used. The engine initializes and starts immediately, as it is needed to run the editor, but creation and initialization of objects such as the game instance are deferred until the user presses the button to launch the PIE or SIE session. Again, what are those sessions? um, in addition, the actors in the level are duplicated so that in-game changes do not affect the level in the editor. And every object, including the game instance object, has a separate copy for each PIE instance. The editor path rejoins the standalone path with the beginning of the gameplay in the UWorld class. Okay, it'd be nice if they explain what PIE or SIE is. I can only make guesses about it. I've personally never heard either one of those two terms before in my life,
No.
and that's. Oh wait.
One documentation might have mentioned one of them at least.
No, I'm being stupid because they're not labeling it properly. PIE is play in editor, and SIE is simulate in editor. It's right above. They didn't. They didn't
They
put
didn't
like
abbreviate it there.
they didn't put in brackets PIE or SIE afterwards to basically show that this is play in editor and that's simulate in editor. If you're going to use acronyms, make sure that you associate the words used with the acronym there is. Otherwise, we make guesses and, so on and so forth. Plus, the fact that they used it, well, actually, they didn't really use it too much above other than within the flowchart itself. So in the flowchart here, the initialized PIE is play in editor. Got it. Now, they don't really have SIE anywhere in the flowchart, just the play in editor. So that's interesting. like, I wonder, like, what I'm now curious about, which they don't seem to have kind of discussed more, is what is the difference between play-in editor and simulated editor?
I can only guess.
Yeah, same. Um, yeah, again, it's one of those where it's like it would be nice if they kind of explained that a little bit more. But I'm glad that I was able to go, wait, PIE, plain editor. There it is. Duh, facepalm. So, apologies on that. Alright. Is there anything else that you want to talk about on this particular topic, or shall we move on?
Let's move on.
Okay. So we're going to move on to game mode and game state. Now, this one looks to be fairly lengthy, and it also appears that it has a lot of commands being referenced here. So we might still want to kind of go through this anyway, because game state and game modes feels like it's very important to what we need to, so what we're going to need to make when we, make our clone first and then game afterwards, right? So probably need to kind of go through this fully, even though some of it might be like, wait, what? Alright, ready?
Yep.
Alright, game mode and game state. Overview of the game mode and game state. You don't say. It's like, no shit. You don't say. There are two main classes which handle information about the game being played. Game mode and game state. Even the most open-ended game has an underpinning of rules, and these rules make up the game mode. Okay. On the most basic level, these rules include number of players and spectators present, as well as the maximum number of players and spectators allowed. How players enter the game, which includes rules for selecting spawn locations, another spawn respawn behavior. Whether or not the game can be paused, and how pausing the game is handled. Transitions between levels, including whether or not the game should start in cinematic mode. So, okay. So if we were basically making a board game, for example, game mode would basically be the rules of, say, board game.
Yeah.
Like say you want to, make the game a risk or something along those lines. That would show you, like, how many possible players you can have in the game, what the players can do, how to get armies, blah blah blah, and then but it doesn't necessarily talk about like how they're able to actually like interact with the game. That I'm assuming is probably going to be in game state, but obviously we're not there yet. So, but yeah, that's okay. Any insight or questions you have about that so far?
No.
Okay. When rule-related events in the game happen and need to be tracked or shared with all players, that information is stored and synced through the game state. This information includes how long the game has been running. Okay, that's an odd distinction there. But at the same time, I can kind of see the need for that on occasion. But at the same time, there are moments where it's like you don't really need that. So, interesting. Including running time before the local player joined. Okay. when each individual player joined the game and the current state of that player. Again, this is feeling very multiplayer, first-person shooter style
Not
information that they're
necessarily.
kind
That can be applied to single player as well.
of. Well, when it says when each individual player joined the game, that each right there is why I kind of lean towards multiplayer in this particular case. If it was a single player game, it's like when individual player joined the game. They don't need to include that each in there. So that's why it's like, or at least, that's in my mind. So the base class of the current game mode, okay, and whether or not the game has begun. And what way do you mean has begun? Are you meaning as though?
As in the game is running.
Like, well, okay. The my point is that there could be multiple ways of interpreting that statement there. Do you mean when you first start up a game, like everything's getting loaded in, you're seeing like the beginning cinematic, you're seeing the very beginning of the menu, or it could be the initial lobby, like if you're in a multiplayer game, you're seeing a lot of people kind of gathering into a lobby, such as like, Mario Kart, you're having a lot of people join into the lobby. Is that the game beginning?
No,
Or
it's
is it
when you see, like, you start seeing the logo, okay, who made this, who's the publisher, and then you see the menu. That would officially be when the game has begun running. Like, the best example I can think of this is look at Steam. It tracks how long you've been playing, right? And for that, it needs to know when you started it and for how long. And it starts counting the to Steam. Game begin is the moment that you start seeing the like opening cutscene with the logos and things like that.
But at the same time, they can be interpreting this as, when whether or not the game has begun, as in, when the like for multiplayer games such as like Apex or Fortnite or something like that, they might say, the game hasn't officially begun until you actually enter in the arena in that particular case. So there's different interpretations there, but I'm assuming that all that, everything that I've said, could still be considered under that game state. Someone could look at that and look at everything that I just said and say, well, yes, yes, it does, track whether or not the game has officially been loaded in, whether or not you've started up the lobby, and whether or not you're actually in the game playing the game. It
will also track when you're in the starting menu as well.
Yeah, it could all fall into that game state. So, and
when you get that screen, press start to press start. That to the game state would pretty much is already the game begun. You're already seeing something that's in the game, even though you're not actually playing. The game was already running.
Yeah, it both could be correct in this particular case. So, and so and in one way it's like, they're not being very clear, but at the same time it might not necessarily need to be very clear because it covers everything. So yeah, here's the thing though about this is that game modes and game state, like, you have the game mode that is kind of covering over the rules of that game, right? Um, and you have the game state that kind of talks about um, how the game is, I guess, acting as though like, what is its current, what is the game's current state? Is it in the menu? Is it actually playing the game? Are you in a lobby? You know, it it feels as though the game state is just kind of covering that.
Like the game state will be covering everything, pretty much.
What's that?
From my understanding and own experience, I'd say it will be game state will be covering everything from the starting
Everything
menu up until you close the game.
That's how
I have launched games where I've only gone up to the menu just to see if that even launches and closed
Yeah.
it, and on Steam it would have already detected you've been in this game for a few minutes.
Yeah.
So it detected as game start just the moment I was on that, just for being on that menu.
Yeah. The the what I'm kind of questioning about right at this moment in time is, does the actual gameplay where you have input, player input, where you're showing off what's going on in the game, you're showing the graphics, you're showing, you're having the audio, you're having um the input and the output of the um, player controls and stuff like that. They don't necessarily outright state that in as being part of the game state, but at the same time, I could still interpret it as that, but they're not distinctly stating that either. So I wonder, does the game state umbrella cover all of that as well? I don't know. You know, I would, in my mind, it should, but they're not distinctly saying that right at this moment in time. So I don't know. I don't know I don't know like 100%. I'm making the assumption that it does, but I don't know. Do you agree with me on that, or do you feel like um like uh like gameplay, or the controls or something like that might fall more under the game mode?
I'd say that we're more in the game modes, and game modes controls the rules of the game, and controls
Right.
would fall with be into the whole rules section.
Right.
All the game state does is check if those rules are active or not.
Yeah. And that's why it's like, I'm not quite sure. Now, they are showing player controller over there, which obviously is part of, how you control the player, firing weapons and so on and so forth. They have this see also player controller over on the right hand side there. Um, so, um, and obviously, that is indeed, how you control the how the player controls that avatar, whatever that is, right? Um, or the pawn, whatever. Um, so my question would be, you know, is the player controller going to be falling under the game state, or is it going to be falling under the game mode? We'll
Mode.
find out. And then
I'd say mode.
just to,
And all the
you,
game
you,
state is going to say if controller's active or not. That's all the state I think is going to look at.
yeah. Well, we'll find out, or at least hopefully we'll find out. All right. Game modes. Well, certain fundamentals, like the number of players required, or have I already covered everything? Yeah. Okay, I did. while certain fundamentals, like the number of players required to play, or the method by which those players join the game, are common to many types of games, limitless rule variations are possible depending on the specific game you're developing. Regardless of what those rules are, game modes are designed to define and implement them. There are currently two commonly used base classes for game modes. Engine version 4.14 introduces a game mode base, which is the base class for all game modes and is a simplified, streamlined version of the classic A game mode. Okay. A game mode, the game mode base class before version 4.14, still exists and functions as it did before, but is now the child of a game mode base. Okay, interesting. So game mode base is the parent and a game mode is the child. Gotcha. A game mode is more suited to standard game types like multiplayer shooters due to its implementation of the concept of match state. Interesting. Okay. Would so now I've you know that triggered like a question for me, and whether or not you would need a game mode. Like, if you don't have a standard game type, for example, like you're coming up with some really unique game in some way or another, like, no one's ever come up with this concept before, could you, in a way, remove a game mode from even existing? Or is it basically saying, hey, it's automatically going to be in there in the engine? So, I don't know, but, makes me wonder. So, one of the problems with some engines sometimes is that they don't really allow for you to change up the engine to what you need. Sometimes they are very restrictive as to what you can do with the engine itself, or with the engine that you want to provide to the player for that instance. So you might say like, hey, I'm not doing a multiplayer shooter. I don't need this. Will the engine still kind of have it in the instance even though it's never used? So that's why I'm kind of curious about that. But obviously that delves pretty deep into the engine, I would imagine. So, um, any thought lines about that at all there, Blackheart, or are you kind of like same thought line, or do you have anything else that you want to add?
Well, let me think. What I'm thinking is what this has is may have some already base code that is standard throughout certain things. Like in the case of that game mode using for multiplayer, for the concept of match state, could be maybe because it has already some code that helps for matchmaking that's generally used on pretty much every single, like it has standard code for matchmaking, for example.
Yeah, that's how I meant.
But
That's
how
how I'm
would you
interpreting.
that in the case of what you're saying, maybe someone wants to do something different, like how would you change something that's already a standard for pretty much everything?
Mm-hmm.
You would need to really think outside the box to change
Mm-hmm.
that standard.
Right. And believe me, there are definitely games out there that have broken the rules, from time to time as to how they want to go about doing their gameplay, right? There's been some very unique games out there that have broken that mold. So, so while yes, a game mode there being used for standard game types like multiplayer shooters would be very helpful for you, especially if you are designing a multiplayer shooter in a game. Like say, you want to make a Fortnite clone or something like that, right? Then you're perfectly, you know, a game mode would be, you know, really in line with what you want to do. But let's say you want to do something that is completely off the wall, um, like maybe I don't know, like Subnautica, for example, right? You know, you don't really have a like a well, it's definitely not a multiplayer shooter, so
No,
you know, um,
but it wouldn't.
but
They
I mean,
wouldn't use this. It probably use the other version. Since at the end it says that uh, it's
a game mode basis new default game mode, including new code projects due to simplicity and efficiency.
yeah,
Yeah,
because of the simplicity of efficiency. If you were not making a multiplayer, then you would use game mode base, then and
right,
not a game mode.
right, and that's the reason why they made it the parent to
What
a
I'm
game
guessing,
mode.
maybe what a
So,
game mode base has, maybe like simplified controllers, like movement, maybe
mhm.
jumping or crouching, like maybe have some preset standard controls.
Right. Which I mean, you could probably just go ahead and kind of ignore as well, depending on your game as well. Um, but yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, a game mode based, I would be like, yeah, no problem. That's obviously as it says, the base class for all game modes. Okay, no problem. Um, but if it, you know, but if a game mode is, specifically for a multiplayer shooter, then I'd have to wonder, is there a way to just kind of
Well, multiplayer
remove a
shooters like
game
an
mode?
example. Like I just look at the multiplayer in general.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, they're saying, more suited to standard game types. So I don't know exactly what all is included in the standard game types, but they could be including like, RPGs. They could be talking about action. They could be talking about adventure. They could be talking about, first-person
MOBAs.
shooters. Who knows? Game mode could have all that kind of built into it. So we still might use it. You know, they're just using a multiplayer shooter as an example of that,
Yeah.
which obviously we wouldn't necessarily use, but we still might need to use a game mode anyway, depending on what game type we want to create. So,
Hi there,
you know,
Mila.
I, I would just kind of be curious if there's a way to remove a game mode. Like, say, like, hey, we don't need it, don't include it, we're fine without it, we're just going to use a game mode base, and we're going to be happy with that. That's what I'm, that's what I'm kind of wondering about, but we'll see. I would hope so, but again, we'll see. Okay, so a game mode base. All game modes are subclasses of a game mode base, which contains considerable base functionality that can be overridden. That's good. I like when you can override some of the functionality uh, that they have. So, you know, like for example, if they say like, "Hey, this is how you have to interact with the menu," and you're like going, "No, this is, I want to do it in this, in this different way," then it'd be nice to be able to, change that possibilities, right? So, um, so yeah, that's just thinking out loud there. So, okay, init game. The init game event is called before any other scripts, including pre-initialized components, and is used. My my page is a little too thin there. It's kind of cutting off some of the letters. Um, a game event is called before any other scripts, including pre-initialization and pre-initialized components, and is used by a game mode base and pre-initialized components. Or game mode base, pre-initialized components. Okay. Pre-login. Accepts and rejects a player who is attempting to join the server, if you need them to join a server. So, causes the login function to fail if it sets error message to a non-empty string. Pre-login is called before login, and a significant amount of time may pass before the login is called, especially if the joining player needs to download game content. Okay, interesting. You know, makes sense on that. But again, that's if you need or have a server that they need to kind of log into. Like, for example,
Genshin, Warframe, pretty much any
Yeah.
online game.
yeah. But, you know, you might not, and this might not really be needed for, say, like, you know, standalone games like, say, Kingdom, for example, or XCOM or something along those lines. Something that doesn't really have any need for a server connection. So, so we might not necessarily, you know, you and I, we're probably not going to be needing this right away.
Yeah.
You know, if we're going to be, like, you know, building our games specifically for Steam, for example, this pre-login is kind of handled by Steam, you know, alone.
Maybe.
And therefore we wouldn't really have any form of pre-login within our game itself. You know, because we
As
wouldn't
long as it's
have
not
our own.
necessary for like the cloud saving, I guess not.
Yeah. Now, if for some reason we have like Steam connecting to our own personal launcher that connects to a server, then that makes sense, right?
Right.
You know, like if for some reason you have Genshin Impact has a you know, you can set up the launcher for Genshin Impact into Steam, which I don't think
No,
that's
Epic
possible.
does. No, Epic
I
is
don't.
the sole owner of it.
Yeah. You know. So, but I mean, you know, but that, you know, but let's, you know, World of Warships does that. So, just saying, you know. Although I don't really know if the Steam version launches the World of Warships launcher, then you log in, or if it launches directly into the game itself.
If I remember correctly, it does say you need a third-party account, so you would have a login to the worship server. So you would need this pre-login.
Alright. Well, no, I'm, you know, I know World of Warships has its own launcher.
No, but
I
even
can't
Steam says for like some games like that, that you need to have an account on the worship site. Even if you're using the Steam version, you still need the worship's account.
Yeah. Yeah. I just can't remember if the Steam launches their launcher, you know. Now obviously it might, you know,
Probably a
if
version
it's-
of their launcher.
Maybe. Yeah, probably. But either way, that pre-login would matter for, say, like World of Warships, right? So yeah. It is now 3 o'clock. Shall I just kind of go through the post login through logout and then we'll end it there, or?
Sure.
Okay. So post login, called after a successful login. This is the first place it is safe to call replicated functions on the player controller. On post login can be implemented in Blueprint to add extra logic. Okay. Understandable about that. Handle starting new player. Called after post login or after seamless travel, this can be overridden in Blueprint to change what happens to a new player. By default, it will create a pawn for the player. Okay. I wonder if post login is also kind of in charge of like handling like the menu system or something like that. You know, you would think that there would be like a menu system in here, but I'm not seeing anything in this particular list. So I wonder if like maybe they don't have one, or if they're kind of including that under the whole post login. You know, having that extra logic under the post login. You know, I don't know. Just thinking out loud. Restart player. This is called to start spawning a player's pawn. There's also restart player at player start and restart player at transform functions available if you want to dictate where the where the pawn will be spawned. On restart player can be implemented in Blueprint to add logic after this function is finished. Okay. Kind of curious about the at transform. I'm assuming at transform might mean like at a different point in the map, maybe. Like you have to specify on the map, like this is a transform of a new spawn, maybe?
I'm guessing, yeah, that could be the case. Like, for example, on Genshin, if you get knocked out, you'll respawn at the last portal you used.
Right.
And if you use a different portal, that it would transform that spawn over to that new portal.
Right. So, or at least it, you know, might go, hey, you're closer to this one portal, so we'll automatically set the transform to that one portal or something like that, or something like, you know, who knows. But it's the only thing that I can think of on that one. Spawn default pawn at transform. This is what actually spawns the player's pawn and can be overridden in blueprints. Okay. I mean, that's pretty pretty self-explanatory. So, and then log out. Called when the player leaves the game or is destroyed. On logout can be implemented to do proof logic. Okay, this is a little scary to me. You know, in a way, because logout could be in line with a login, right? As in you're shutting down the game completely. Like you don't need to be in the game. You need to shut down the server. You know, you shut down the connection to the server. Blah blah blah. They're not saying that for this logout. Well, I mean, they say, you know, leaves the game, which is okay, kind of. I mean, it's not wrong, but at the same time, it's like they're not specifically stating that outright that they are, you know, leaving. You know, they're leaving the server. So, and the fact that it's, you know, when a player is destroyed, it's like, what does
not
that
doesn't necessarily mean player, more like it says when that you leave the game or is destroyed, like the game is destroyed, which could be a reference to a crash, for instance, or a power outage that shuts you down. That could be seen as destroyed.
Okay, so you're interpreting the is destroyed in concerning the game instead of how the player leaves the game or the game itself is destroyed. That's how you're interpreting that
Yeah.
sentence. Okay, which again, that could be exactly what they're talking about in that particular case. Um, so yeah, okay. Um, that makes sense, but again, they didn't specifically outright say that it's talking about like leaving the server or anything along those lines. So that's why it's like, mm. are you basically saying that sure they've stopped the connection or they've stopped the game, but they're still connected to the server somehow? Hmm. So the server is now collecting information from the player's computer. Okay. you know. Now we're talking about like um, conspiracy theories and stuff like that. The servers are inside your computer, downloading your data, stealing all your information. And then who knows? Some of that might actually be true.
Who knows?
With how some companies are nowadays.
Well,
Yeah. So.
I mean, Windows 11 is kind of like that, and was it iOS that does that technically, since they can delete stuff from your device if they want to.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I'm kind of irritated with the fact that Windows kind of ignores my default browser. I set my default browser, and they have like certain apps that you can kind of download into Windows 11. And it's like, oh, okay, you want Facebook? Sure. If you want Twitter? Sure, it's there, blah, 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 right? But when you launch them, it goes to Edge, not your default. And it's like,
Odd.
wait.
I haven't had that issue with mine. I set mine
I've
to Firefox, and I haven't had that issue yet.
Well, I mean, whenever I launch Firefox, I don't have any problems with it, right? But I've had like on my tablet, that's also Windows 11.
Really, Aaron?
I've had like Facebook and Twitter, as applications on my tablet. So when I click on them, it loads up Edge and not Firefox. And I'm like, what are you doing there, Windows? What the fuck? So I've had that issue. So, and they've basically stated that Windows has, they do it that way to make sure that everything loads in properly, because they're never quite sure if your default browser can handle everything that it can handle or something like that.
No,
it's
they
like,
just want to make sure they can collect data from their users.
pretty much.
That's why I go into the actual Windows configuration and disable a few things.
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it wants to do that. So, but
some of those configurations are a bit hidden. I don't remember how.
Yeah.
My dad actually helped me with that, since he's the one who works with that.
Yeah.
So they cannot mess with anything that I want.
Yeah.
That includes updates. They cannot force me to an update anymore. If I don't want it, I don't want it.
I mean, there is a, there's sometimes a good reason to update. Making sure that it fixes any kind of security risks to your computer.
Yeah, the problem with those updates is they can be hefty, and not all hard drives can handle that. Like, the hard drive on my current laptop is too risky to allow a Windows update, because those updates are big.
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah,
I don't
and
want the
then
updates on my laptop. They're gonna be a problem for my hard drive.
yeah, and especially if they're not like, and like if they're adding, and not subtracting some of the old content, then it's like, well, it's you're just gonna get, you know, a lot of a lot of just overfull of data, and it's like, ugh.
Yeah.
No, I hear you on that one, you know, and that's, you know, um, I on one hand it's like, yeah, I believe me, I completely understand, if you have a very limited space on your hard drive and stuff like that, then you need to kind of control what, comes in and out of your computer, right? Um, but at the same time, you also potentially could run the risk of having someone, access your computer as well. If you have security updates that aren't put in place. But I mean, that is, in my opinion, that is based off of the user's computer. You know, hey, if they want to be, if someone wants to be like completely ignorant, I'm never gonna update this whatsoever, then hopefully they'll never complain if they get, their computer completely taken over at some
Yeah.
point, right? You know, it's like,
Yeah.
how
That
dare
also falls
Windows?
into, okay, where are you? What sites are you getting into, and who are you actually trusting with it?
Exactly. Um, like if someone was like on, and I'm never gonna update it ever. I'm never gonna take any of these security updates and blah blah blah, and then suddenly like someone gains access to their computer, locks it down, and stuff like that, and they're like, how dare Windows not protect me? It's like, well, you kind of did it to yourself a little bit. So, um, so it's one of those things where it's like, you have to, you know, uh, your dad, everybody at your house, you
Yeah.
guys know what you're
We
doing, so
install
you
other
guys,
like we install secondary protection software
yeah,
so that we don't have to worry about it,
yeah,
and that
or
it's lighter.
you try to not to worry about it, you know. But I mean, let's face it. We
Yeah,
would
I have one
be,
installed right now that's constantly scanning for threats whenever I'm browsing.
yeah, um, yeah, and indeed. Um, the I'm just letting anybody that's listening know that, hey, if a hacker wants to try to get into your computer, believe me, they'll find a way. Okay. You'd have to be, you know you'd have to have a lot of security to prevent, a hacker from breaking into your computer. And sometimes, in some ways, the best security is not being online at all.
Yeah.
You know, so that's it. You know, but that's, you have to, there are certain things that you're gonna have to just accept in some ways. So, if you're online, you run the risk of being hacked. So, period.
Yeah.
So,
Just
but
don't get anywhere shady to begin with.
that, that someplace shady is definitely you know a big no-no. That's for sure.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to some very um, unknown sites that are very um, not secure, has a lot of pop-ups. Well, guess what? You're risking for them to go, "Ooh, hey, here's a free computer. It's ours now." Or, "Hey, look at all this information that's on your computer that you've just,
Yeah. And if you see a lot of
you've."
ads on the site, just don't bother clicking on those ads.
Oh,
Those are the most dangerous one of them all.
indeed.
Put an ad
Especially if you
blocker or
don't know,
something.
especially if you don't know where those ads are coming from, too.
Yeah.
You know.
That's why ad blockers are a thing.
Yeah. Um,
Shut up, Mittens. Not now.
yeah. Okay, well, that's going to be it for the Unreal Engine. We're going to go ahead and stop there.
Yep.
After the whole logout section there, we'll go ahead and continue with this next time. Um, just a word of warning, my friend. I'm coming close to a section in my Pega certification that is going to take hours to complete. So
Yeah, don't worry. If
when
you need that time, you let me know, and we don't do Unreal, or maybe
I
I
just wanted
experiment with level design on my own.
Yeah.
I got a few assets that I got from Unreal for free, and I could maybe mess with and try and create my own level just for practice.
Okay. That's fine. I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up on that because
just let me know, and so I know
yeah,
that we won't be doing this.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's probably going to be coming up in the next day or two.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll give you a heads up.
Yep.
But I also want to let everybody else know that that the Unreal might be paused a little bit in time and being outputted to our channels for a day or two while I work on the Pega certification.
Yep. No problem there.
So, okay.
Yep.
All right, my friend. That's where we're gonna go ahead and close on down for tonight. I want to thank everybody for coming on by and stopping on by, chatting with us. So, including those that are just kind of lurking in the background, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. If you have any kind of comments or suggestions, or you want to answer some of our questions that we had, feel free to post that into our chats while we're live, or put it into the comment section on our videos, and then Blackheart and I will share it with each other. Unless you want to put it on both of our videos, then you're welcome to do that if you want.
Yeah.
Then we'll be like, oh, did you get this one message? Yeah, we got it. Okay. Awesome. Check the description for various links that both Blackheart and I have. He has his links, I have my links.
Yep.
Discord, Patreon, Drone, just a couple of examples. Also the robot team application, link is down in the description as well if you wanna join up on Team Robot. Check that out. Anything else?
No, I don't think of. I already did my setup before I joined your stage. I'm not worried.
Okay. Alright, man.
Right.
Well, I'll leave you to your end to wrap up, and I will do the same. So you have a good night, and I'll catch you next time, okay?
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Mittens, could you stop rubbing your face on the fan? Do you have any idea how hard it is to get rid of the squeaky? Great, I can get rid of the squeakiness. I'll fix it once I close down. Okay, so yeah. That is gonna be it for this stream. I'm gonna close down, go get something to eat, and I'll be back for some Rebel Galaxy. Well, I'll actually finish up gearing up that Dreadnought I got my hands on, and maybe carry on with the story, hopefully. But again, thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed today's stream, and I hope to see you all in a little bit. Bye bye for now!